Hi, class. Today we're going to be reading the story Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak. Where the Wild Things Are. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind. And another. His mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, "I'll eat you up." So he was sent to bed without eating anything. That very night in Max's room, a forest grew. And grew. And grew until his ceiling hung with vines and the walls became the world all around. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max, and he sailed off through night and day. And in and out of weeks and almost over a year to where the wild things are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. Till Max said, "Be still," and tamed them with the magic trick of staring into all of their yellow eyes without blinking once, and they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all. And made him king of the wild things. "And now," cried Max, "let the wild rumpus start." "Now stop," Max said, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper. And Max, the king of all the wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. Then, all around him from far away across the world, he smelled good things to eat. So he gave up being king of where the wild things are. What kind of smells would you imagine if you were smelling good things to eat? But the wild things cried, "Oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up. We love you so." And Max said, "No." The wild things roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. But Max stepped into his private boat and waved goodbye. And sailed back over a year and in and out of weeks and through a day and into the night of his very own room, where he found his supper waiting for him. And it was still hot. I love this story so much. Let's think a little bit about what happened in the story. We know that he traveled to where the wild things are, and he came back home. When he came back home, what did he find waiting for him in his room? That's correct. He found his supper or his dinner waiting for him. How do you think that got there? How do you think his supper ended up in his room? His parents probably brought it to him. So, it says that he traveled for weeks and months and years. Did he actually travel for weeks and months and years if his supper was still waiting for him and it was hot? What do you think? If his supper was still hot, that means that not a lot of time has passed, right? Because it would get cold if a lot of time had passed, if years had passed. So we know that this was more in his imagination. The time was not actually a year. He just imagined that it was a year. I love the fantasy elements in this story. I love the imagination. So I want you to use your imagination. If you had a forest grow in your room overnight, and you got on a private little boat with your name on it, and you were sailing to where the wild things are, what kind of wild things would you see? What would the setting be like? Would it be similar to the story, or would it look different? Would your wild things look the same, or would they look different? What would your wild things do? What kind of things would they eat? Time, I want you to either write a creative story or draw a picture of what it would look like if you went to where the wild things are. What would your wild things look like? What would the setting look like? Draw a picture or write a story. All right, bye guys. I had such a great time doing a story time and can't wait till our next one.